Hey chappies, 2025 is almost upon us, and there's nothing more urgent, nothing more important that you could be doing in this moment than to lay down the foundations for a great year ahead. So let's do just that. Now, you could do what we're about to at any point in time, and ideally, you should be doing this every quarter, but there is no time like the present, and we are officially done with a quarter of this century. Can you believe that? Which makes it the most opportune time that you should be doing this. So, what is this life alignment system? It's a pretty simple four-step system, as all such systems tend to be. Step one is probably one of the harder things to do. In step one, you gotta take time out, slow everything down, put yourself in a room. Ideally, it should be dark, there should be no stimuli, and it's just you and your thoughts. And it's not just unprompted thoughts, you also gotta have a structure. So the structure should be to get a sense, get a real deep insight into what the areas of improvement that you most want to focus on. Because I'm sure that you can think of a million things that you'd love to have changed about you. Maybe not a million, but like at least 10, right? But right now you forget about focusing or honing it in on things. Right now it's about just getting a really good sense of where you are in your life in relation to where you want to be, in relation to who you want to be. So in this session, you're doing a deep audit. You're doing an inventory of your mind, of your life, in the different aspects, be it mental health, be it mental fitness, be it emotional fitness, be it health and fitness, be it relationships, be it how effective you are as in your goal pursuits, in your life goal pursuits, in terms of maximizing experiences, filling the buckets of your life. So how are you doing in all those different areas? And these different areas are going to have a different priority levels for you. And again, it's for you to figure out what are the most important things and how these different things come together. Again, the less stimuli you have while you're doing this, the better the exercise. So ideally, put yourself in a room. There should be no devices. Sure, you can do it during the daytime too, it's fine. Ideally, you should close your eyes for some time. And you also got to do this in relationship, and you'll have a vague idea of what your ideal self looks like and what your ideal life looks like. Because one of the hurdles that you might face when you're thinking about your present life is that if you don't have a reference, or if your reference is, pop culture or societal conditioning, then you're not going to have the right wall to put your ladder at. You're not going to aim at the right thing. And if you don't aim at the right thing, which for you is your own perception of your ideal self, even before the ideal life, then you're not going to reach the target. So start asking yourself some hard-hitting questions. And do not allow your ego to protect yourself as the answers start spilling out into the light. Your ego is going to do its damnedest to prevent you from seeing you in your ugliness in the areas where you deem that you're not being as effective, you're not being the kind of person that you want to be. And that is where you want to put in more efforts to prevent your ego from doing its thing. And the more you can do this in an egoless manner, where you don't attach a sense of self-worth to this evaluation, the more effective this will be, because you will be able to look at yourself in the mirror in all your unvarnished glory. And again, this is where you want to have the best image of you, the most realistic image of you possible. Because the closer you are to the reality of who you are, the better and the faster and the more effective your transformation process will be. The process of bridging the gap between where you are and where you want to be will be. There'll be two categories of questions that you'll ask yourself over here. The first category of questions will be around the habits that you have, the patterns that crop up time and again, that prevent you, that keep you from being your happiest self, being your most effective self. And these could be self-sabotaging, this will be by definition self-sabotaging patterns. But again, you want to note down, and it's best to have a pen and paper rather than having a device, so that you can actually write down the thoughts that come into your mind. And so you want to start asking yourself questions around what are the things that I want and what are the things that are preventing me, what are the things in me, and invariably it will be things in you that are preventing you from being who you want to be. Life is a different thing, because to some degree, and that is true for a lot of the things I want to do, it's not just about you. You have to also kind of get lucky beyond a certain scale of goals. For example, if you want to build a business that does $1 billion of revenue, you could be the smartest cookie, you could be the hardest working person, You could have all those right attributes, and those attributes would increase the chances of getting to that goal, but you also gotta get lucky. So yeah, but that's for the life outcomes part, right? I want to focus just on yourself. Everything that you want to be, you can be. The only thing which is preventing you from being that person is you. That's it. Simple as that. So start by identifying your key areas of concern, the key habits, the patterns that keep you from being your happiest, that drain your energy, that prevent you from living an aligned life to your ideal self. And again, take down as many notes as possible during this period. The longer the period, the better it is, because having these kinds of self conversations, letting these thoughts come to the fore, is going to, depending on how often you practice self introspection, how often you practice self reflection, it might take a while for you to actually, it'll be like a vomit of the good kind, where these thoughts will start coming to the fore, and you don't want to do anything. These are going to be like deers, right? These are going to be like rabbits. These are going to be like butterflies. You want to be very delicate in how you let them come to you, but not being very forceful, right? By not letting your ego do its thing, by not letting your ego dictate or your self-image dictate its terms. So now you've been sitting with yourself for 30 minutes and a couple of hours, the more the merrier. And now you've got notes and notes of the problems, the areas of improvement, the habits that are not optimal, that you don't want in your arsenal, that you don't want in your makeup, the patterns that crop up time and again in these little moments and these frequent moments that are not aligned with how you want to turn up in these events. And your next step it's not a step, it's just a part of this step. Your next mini step is to organize these thoughts by order of importance. There'll be some habits, and for me, the 3 habits that I identified as I've nailed down as being around 95% of the misery creator in my being, in my psyche. If I can fix these, and I'm well on the way of fixing these, then I remove 95 to 98% of the core problems that I deem to be existential in my case. So again, you'll have some issues. You'll have these core problems that you need to hone in on as the next mini step. Now we go to step 2. You create a detailed plan. Now you've got a really good sense, a really good handle on where you trip up, your energy drains, your time drains. And so now you can start detailing a plan to fix these issues. For example, if you're someone who is prone to procrastination, if you're someone who spends an inordinate amount of time watching stuff on TV or on your devices on YouTube, etc., then you know that is one of the core areas where you're losing your time. So again, depending on your context, you can create plans, personalized plans for you to fix. It is very important that you don't get overwhelmed, because if you get overwhelmed, then you're not going to be able to go through this process, right? Because transformation requires a lot of chops. It requires you to rise to your highest levels, the levels that you've never risen to. And if you make it difficult for you by deciding that I'm going to have a complete radical transformation, I'm going to go from 50 to 100 in a matter of a few months, as great as that ideal sounds, you're never going to be able to do it. Not only that, you'll fail on every other metric, because you just won't be able to. You have to respect your current reality. It's very important that you understand that as great as the difference that might be between your current self and your ideal self, your current self is still a thing, right? As much as you might despise that being, it's still it is the only thing that is at this moment. Your ideal self does not really exist. And so if you operate in a vacuum without really taking into account your current self, then you're going to fail. And you're going to fail miserably. Instead of that, if you take a sustainable approach, if you decide that, okay, so these are the main areas that I can focus on, let's pick 2, let's pick 3, whatever, right? And I've got a plan that can work respecting. When I say the word respecting in this context, I don't mean that you have to love your current self. I just mean respecting in the sense that there are certain realities that you have to take into account. For example, if you're someone who is fat, you cannot, no matter what, you cannot run a marathon in 6 months. If you're someone who reads slowly, you cannot get to the point where you can complete a book in a week, right? Or if you're someone who's prone to, pick any problem, pick any poison of your choosing, And if your distance from the current and the ideal is very high, then you're not going to be able to accomplish these goals in a matter of a few months. And if you set yourself up for these goals, you're going to set yourself up for failure because you are never going to achieve those goals. And so the message that you're going to send to yourself once you fail and once you know that you're failing, because it won't take you the entirety of that journey. Let's say you set a 6-month goal, it won't take you to the entirety of that journey. You'll realize in a month's time that, okay, I'm not succeeding, right? I'm not getting to where I want to be. I'm not where I ought to have been at the 1 month mark, right? It's just going to send all the wrong signals to you in your journey. Don't do that. That's why it's very important that you arrive at 3 to 5 core areas. And a lot of self-alignment, life alignment has elements of the Pareto law, right? Where if you fix those tiny little issues, you're going to get disproportionate positive impacts. And for me, as I mentioned, it's 3 issues, 95 to 98% problem unlock. For you, it could be 1 issue, that could be health, for example, right? Let's say you're someone who's fat. Now, if you fix that could be your keystone. And, going on a walk, going on a brisk walk every day, that could be a keystone habit to fix that. Now, that's going to unlock a lot of the other areas. You could start from that. So take an essentialist, minimalistic approach to this. One of my favorite books of all time is The Essentialist, which goes into how having an essentialist approach to life, because most of the results, most of the things that you want to do, you can spread yourself too thin. For example, there are lots of things I wanted to do, lots of projects I wanted to build, but that approach always set me up for failure. Now that I'm focused on 2 to 3 main projects, I'm getting a lot more bang for my buck. And even in the future, there are lots of things I want to do, but I won't do them unless I know that, I can give myself fully to these projects, right? So you want to have an essentialist approach to life, because that's the only way that you're going to have. If you take any genius, if you take any inventor, if you take any artist, if you take any great creator, producer, thinker, visionary, CEO, right? These are people who operate by essentialist principles. They realize that the greatest value lies in these few most important things. And instead of focusing on 10 different things, if you just focus on these 3, Elon Musk, the best example of this, the way he operates, Mark Andreessen was talking about this recently on a podcast, the way he operates is that he doesn't focus on, the 10 different things that Tesla cares about in that particular quarter, or the 15 different things that SpaceX cares about. He hones in on the one big problem, the one big unlock, and he spends all his energy on fixing that issue. And then he repeats that process. So he's just focused on that one little thing rather than focusing on different. For him, it's mostly things in project and engineering and design. Even then, he's very constrained in his approach, because even project is very broad, even design is very broad. So he is despite what you might think about him, he is one of the greatest operators in human history. There's no denying that fact. Lots of other people, most of the probably most effective people in any domain of your choice, they operate by essentialist principles, even if they might not call these principles essentialist. Essentialist principles basically are about honing in on the few things that matter the most and giving almost all of your time to the exclusion of all the things that don't matter. Designing your life in such a way that you focus on those things more than anything else. And that's what you need to do over here if you want to get real results and you want to get results quickly. Counterintuitively, the fastest way to get those results is by having an essentialist approach. The fastest way to an ideal, comprehensive, complete ideal self is by focusing on few things at a time, rather than focusing on all of the different aspects of what makes for your ideal self. So do that, pick those key areas, remove your self-sabotaging blocks, remove the time drains, remove all of the things that keep you away, because to a large degree, self-alignment, ideal self-alignment system is about removing the obstacles, because happiness, growth, progress in life, most of these things are pretty simple. You can make a plan for this. The problem is that you're going to get in your way, right? So you got to create a plan to basically get yourself out of the way so that you can do the things that you want to do. Because the fact that you want to do these things says that there's an impulse in you, a strong impulse in you that wants to go in that direction. So why do you not go in that direction? Because you're getting in the way. Your habits, your tendencies, your temperaments, because of all sorts of historical reasons, you get in the way, right? And yeah, so you got to start unraveling and untangling and unwinding these habits and these patterns over time. And once you've done enough of that, you will cease getting in your way and you will go full steam ahead in the pursuit of your goals. So, step 3 is what we next talk about. Step 3 is about creating an additional layer of a plan. So, this plan is about, again, I don't want to give my personal examples because these are quite personal things to me, but step 2 is about creating a plan to fix the issue. But that's not going to get you anywhere because I'm sure that you made plans before. Where you trip up is the execution part. So now you need to have an execution plan. What does this look like? You gotta, going back to our point about respecting your current self, you gotta realize that unwinding from these habits that have been a part of you for a long bloody time, unwinding from disentangling yourself from these patterns that have been a part of your psyche, of your makeup for a long time, it's going to require immense efforts. And there'll be times when you'll be tempted to give in to the path of least resistance, which is how you got to this point. There'll be, or which the path of least resistance, which is going to keep you going on this path, on this. So you gotta realize that you will face hurdles. You will face hurdles, and those hurdles will be significant at the start, and they'll start decreasing in intensity. But let's say you're someone who's been a glutton, or someone who eats a lot, or someone who tends to procrastinate. Let me just give my personal example. Procrastination is one of the things that I struggle with the most. And for me, that comes from a fear of both succeeding and failing, counterintuitively. It comes from a fear of failure because part of me, the way I rationalize this, and again, I'm working to, but it's one of my main things I'm working on. The way I rationalize this and the way I observe the patterns in my brain playing out when I make those unhealthy choices of instead of doing the hard work, doing the easy work, or not doing any work, the way I rationalize it is that, even if I was to do the hard work, what are the odds of this succeeding? Because you're trying to do something which is pretty darn difficult, right? So if you don't give your best, you can at least say to yourself that, because if you give your best, then you'll feel that there's something missing in you, that constitutionally you're not capable, if you're not smart enough for it, you don't have the skills for it, you don't have the aptitude for it, you don't have the intelligence for it, right? But if you don't give it your best, then you might be able to rationalize, you know what, I didn't give it my best. If I did give it my best, I would succeed, right? So that's a very common pattern, by the way. And the succeeding part is to do with the fact that the level that I'm playing at, or the level at which I want to play at, with the kinds of things I'm building and working on, they would put me in a completely different stratosphere of existence. The problems I would have to solve, the problems I would have to tackle, would be completely different. And I've been comfortable in my self-identity for a long time, tackling small-scale problems. But if I succeed, which is, again, the whole point of it, if I succeed, then, again, to get concrete, I'm building a product that I hope hundreds of millions of users will use, right? And that'll become a consequential part of culture. That'll become a consequential part of shaping culture. That'll become a consequential part of how humans act in that particular domain, right? Now, if I succeed, that puts a lot of pressure on me. That puts a lot of responsibility on my shoulders that a part of me doesn't want to accept because it's just difficult. Well, difficult for my current self, for my future self. If I walk the right path, it will become as easy as it is for me to be me currently, right? So again, this is an area where a lot of people trip up, that their future self-identity seems so overwhelming, seems so imposing, intimidating, because of all the things that future person is doing. For example, for me, I'm leading an organization that employs hundreds of thousands of really smart, talented people more talented than me. And that's a company that is building great products, right? Now, that puts a lot of pressure on you. That puts a lot of stress on you, on your current self, which is not capable, obviously, of handling that, right? Which means that you're going to do everything to prevent getting to that point because you know that your current self is not capable of handling that. And so you're trying to keep yourself away from having to handle that at all. So that's why, it's both those fears at those extreme ends which keep me trapped in this vicious cycle. The way to get out of this, again, I'm not going to continue with my example, but way to get out of this is to identify how do you actually, so there's a behavior that keeps you trapped, but how do you actually mechanistically engage in that behavior, right? For example, if you're someone who uses food as coping mechanism, then your problem is your coping mechanism mechanistically giving into food, right? So all of these problems are in a way problems, well, not in a way, but entirely problems in our minds, right? So there are these problem constructs, and then these problem constructs manifest themselves as behaviors in the real world. The behaviors per se, they're not the problem, they are symptomatic of something deeper, right? And that deeper issue is the issue that you want to solve for, because the behaviors, in a way, you can think of the behavior as a symptom. Any behavior you can think of that you afflicted with, that you don't want to be a part of your being, is coming from a place. It's not that behavior might be wrong or might be suboptimal in your eyes. That doesn't matter. Obviously, it's going to be, because it's connected to a suboptimal issue in you, right? So now you got to create an execution plan. You want to have a plan for that takes into account exactly where you fail, where you trip up, when you solve this particular core issue, this elephant issue, this dragon issue. Where do you trip up? And having strategies around being able to solve for these things. Having a strategy, having plans, plan A, plan B, plan B, C for different temptations, different things that might trip you up. That is the execution plan. And the execution plan obviously forms naturally from the plan that you made in plan B, but it's a much more, I wouldn't call it detailed, but it takes into account your reality at a deeper level, at the way you behaviorally turn up in the world. So that's the plan. All of this, we've done with the easy bits, if you want to call them actually, if you figure out step 3, and step 1 is all about self-awareness and being able to, tough it out, fighting against your ego, against your self-image. Step 2 is about getting your plan in order, understanding where your issues are stemming from, and getting a plan in place, having an essentialist plan in place. Step 3 is about having an execution plan that really takes into account all the different ways that you trip up based on your observations from the last couple of hours of the self-audit session. And step 4 is the part where it gets tough, but also gets easy in a way, because now it's all about mechanistically putting one foot in front of the other, right? It's that quote, I think the Tony Robbins quote, that it's much easier to, I don't remember the exact wording, but the essence is that instead of focusing on getting in a certain state of mind, just take the damn action, right? It can be little, it can be putting one brick in place. It can be if you want to develop a long working or deep session habit, right? It's about spending 10 minutes focused on a book without any distractions. And then you can increase it brick by brick, right? And then doing these little things day in, day out. Executing with the entirety of your being, mastering all of the self-discipline, all of the willpower that you can master. And again, it's going to be difficult at the start, and that's why you got to be reasonable, because you can't get into these negative self-talk loops, right? Where you say that, oh, I failed, I just cannot do it, right? Or you start rationalizing that, I failed, it's fine, not a biggie, right? But so you gotta be really tough. You gotta parent yourself. You gotta tutor yourself. You gotta coach yourself. You gotta God yourself. God, God. You gotta be your own God in this moment. And you gotta keep yourself on the straight and the narrow in this initial period, because it is going to get easy pretty soon. Whilst you're doing this, you also ought to make it a point to celebrate the small wins. You gotta make it a point to document your journey so that you can pick up insights that you can again use to improve the process, to make the process easier. And you gotta keep on engaging in self-alignment sessions, ideally every week, every Sunday, which is what I do. You gotta stay accountable to yourself. You ought not let your sabotaging patterns be normalized, or you gotta raise your standards, your expectations from yourself, because again, what you were was a product of your standards from yourself. And every time you allow something to happen And every time you accept that, it's fine, you're going to allow it to be normalized in your brain. So you got to be really careful going forwards. So keep on doing this. Strive on inculcating your new identity of someone who works really hard, someone who spends 15 hours a day working towards their goals, someone who spends 5 hours a day reading, someone who never misses a workout, no matter how tempting it might be, or no matter how busy life gets, someone who never fails to turn up once they're promised that they will. So, to sum up, step one is where you take a deep inventory of yourself. It's time for an audit. Step two is where you create an essentialist plan, focusing on the few areas that matter the most, based on your self understanding, based on the insights that you gain from your self audit. Step three is where you create an execution plan that takes into account all the different nuances of how you operate, all the different things that trip you up, all of the things in your personal context that might matter beyond the essentialist plan. And step four is where you actually execute and where you document your lessons and your insights and you celebrate the small wins. And celebrating the wins is very important. Celebrating the wins with the people that you love and with yourself for that matter. Getting that positive reinforcement every now and then will keep you motivated to keep on pushing harder and harder. And we're talking just a couple of days before the year starts, but you would ideally do this exercise every 3 months, and you're gonna have new things because you can think of it as a cycle, right? So let's say that there's a habit that you want to fix every month, there's a habit that you want to inculcate every month, and that's going to happen in a 3 month cycle. 3 months is when things start to become automated, but according to some estimations, some studies, it takes 66 to roughly more than 2 months, somewhere in 2 to 3 months, to actually have a habit become permanent, become an autopilot thing. So operating in these 3 month cycles is the perfect speed spot where you can start making and noticing really meaningful change in these 3 month intervals span of time. And if you do this, pretty soon, with the span of a few months, you'll start seeing greater levels of self-alignment. And before you long, your ideal self and your current self will start to become one. And just in scope and the scale of your goals will continue to grow and continue to inspire you further to build the best self possible and to build the best life possible. And what else is life about than to have the best self, right? So on that note, I'll take your leave and thank you for the time. I'll catch you soon. Cheers.